Hello dear subscribers and watchers, what's up? This is Vivs from slidenerd here. In this video, we are going to talk about how to create an SQLite database schema. Now what is the word schema? It collectively means the tables, their structure, the data types for each of those columns involved, the aggregate functions if any, triggers if any, and so on. So first, let's talk about how we create a schema programmatically. Now there is no option to create databases using UI tools unless you use some third-party tool, and hence it is important that you know how to create a database programmatically. Step 1. Define the schema. This includes specifying the database name, the version, the table name, and the column names that you have. Now of course there can be more than one tables, and of course there are several columns out there. Step 2. Create the database. Here you're gonna write query, that is the create table statement over here. Step 3. Execute the queries. Now this can be done from your app or from a separate class called the adapter, where you will perform methods like insert, update, delete, and query that do these operations out there. So let's go to step 1 and try to figure out how we can work with the schema, and then in the upcoming videos we'll talk about the second and the third steps in a lot more detail. Step 1. Define the schema. So let's say I have a simple database that I want to create. Now this is vivs database.db, which is the format you have for an SQLite database file on your mobile device. And then what I have is a table inside which is called vivs table. It has two columns, underscore ID and name. This underscore ID is the primary key, which means it identifies a row of the vivs table uniquely. Now this is an integer and it automatically increments without you guys having to worry about its value. Now probably you're saying that I could have named something like ID over here. Why have you set underscore ID? In Android, it is a convention to keep primary keys with underscore ID for different tables. Even when you work with content providers, you're going to be observing this pattern a lot. So I suggest we stick to the default pattern that Android suggests. So here what I'm going to do is create some different strings. For example, I'm going to say string database name is vivs database.db or vivs database. You can specify the extension if you want, otherwise you can omit it, no problems, it will work either way. Then I will specify the table name by saying string table name is vivs table. Then the UID, which is going to be underscore ID, the first column. What I'm trying to do is for each column I'm trying to create a string that contains the name of the column. The same way I created a string here that contains the name of our table. And why would I do this? This is the question that you have, right? We will see why we are gonna need these values inside separate strings out here, because we are gonna later access them inside our queries. For example, when you say select star from vivs table, at that time you're probably gonna need that, right? Then there's a string name that contains this second column name over here, and at this point you create another integer. Database version is 1. Now we will see why this database version should exist and what happens with it in the upcoming video when we actually work this schema out in Eclipse. So at this point, go ahead and make them private static final, because these are constant fields inside your Android app. For Java syntax, you remember, if you have a constant, you make it private static final. Now private is of course by choice, and static final is what makes something as constant, which means it is a class level variable and it does not change its value. So now let's talk about the SQLite Open Helper class. Create a subclass of the SQLite Open Helper and implement the method onCreate and onUpgrade. Now we will talk about what these two methods are and how you should exactly override them. So first question is, what is SQLite Open Helper? SQLite Open Helper is a class that takes care of opening the database if it exists, creating it if it does not exist, and upgrading it when you perform some changes to the table structure, like maybe you added some columns, or maybe you removed some existing columns, or you changed the data type of some column, and so on and so forth. So here I have a class vivs helper that extends SQLite Open Helper. As soon as I do this, what I'm supposed to do is declare a constructor that takes a context object. Now what I have is a super class constructor being called with 4 parameters: the context, the name of the database. The third argument is a custom cursor object if you plan to create your own cursor. but since we are not doing that, we'll pass null over here. And the fourth option is the database version. Now if you guys remember, we already created these two variables in our previous slide where I said database name is something and database version equals to something, right? So this constructor is a must. If you do not have this super keyword over here with this 4 parameters passing, then your Eclipse is gonna give an error saying you require to override that constructor. So then we have the onCreate method that gets called. We'll take a look at exactly when this onCreate is called and what happens. And then there's the onUpgrade method that gets called. So let's talk about these things in a little more detail and try to find out what works. So at this point what I have is something like this. So onCreate is called when the database is created for the first time. Creation of the tables and the initial data inside the tables, if any, should be put inside the onCreate method. So in other words, you're gonna write the create table statement inside the onCreate method of your SQLite open helper. And then there's the onUpgrade method that gets called when the database needs to be upgraded, which means you performed some changes to the structure of the database. You can drop tables, add tables, or do anything else that you need to move to the new database schema that you have. Now if you add new columns, you can use the alter table statement to do that. And if you rename or remove columns, again you can use the alter table to rename the old table. And you can also transfer data inside the onUpgrade method from your old table to the new table and add existing null values or something for the newly created columns that you have, provided they support a nullable value. So enough talk about this. Let's see how this works. So there you go to our same database. We have SQLite database class. As you guys noticed, this is the class that you guys have been seeing in the last 2 slides, and I did not tell you what it is about. SQLite database is a class or an object, you can say, that's going to represent this database that you just created. And using that object, you're going to perform queries like insert, update, delete, and query to check out what you have with the database. Now database names must be unique within an app, not across all applications. For example, you have this method execute SQL that belongs to this class SQLite database, which takes a string SQL statement. What it's gonna do is execute a single SQL statement that is not a select statement or any other SQLite statement. The reason is this. As you guys notice here, it says public void execute SQL. That means even if this method runs, it's not going to return anything because there is a void over here. And that is why it does not work with those kind of SQL statements that return a value like select or maybe insert that specifies that rows were successfully inserted or not. Multiple statements separated by semicolons are not supported. Hence you can have only a single statement inside the double quotes for a string. And of course, if the SQL statement is invalid, it's gonna throw an SQL exception. So first, let's talk about how this actually works. If you guys remember, we extended the class SQLite open helper and we called that class as Viv's helper. So the first question that we have is, what is this Viv's helper class gonna do? Here is what you're gonna do. Inside your main activity, maybe where you wanna use this, you're gonna create an object of this Viv's helper. And then you're gonna call the method get writable database on that Viv's helper object, and that is gonna give you an object of SQLite database which we just discussed. In other words, this SQLite database object is gonna represent this database you have here on the right hand side, and you're gonna use that object to perform the different queries that you want to do, which we'll be talking about in our upcoming videos. For now, let's talk about how we use our onCreate method that we just discussed while talking about the SQLite open helper. So there's the onUpgrade and then there is the onCreate. As you guys notice, it takes an argument of type SQLite database DB. So here we are gonna say create table Viv's table underscore ID integer primary key auto increment, which specifies that the first column is an integer. It will be our primary key and its value will be auto incremented without we having to worry about it. And then there's of course the name, which is a second column whose data type is varchar with 255 characters. That is the maximum number of characters that you can put inside this column. So here's something I need to tell you right now. We are not talking about SQL so far. Hopefully I'll be talking about SQL in one of my upcoming videos as well, and there we can cover exactly what these statements do and how they work. So then I'll say db.execute SQL. Now notice the SQLite database db is the object I'm using over here to execute my query, and I'm also using the execute SQL method which I just discussed. It returns a void, remember, which means you cannot have a select or something, but here we are just creating a table, and hence I'm saying db.execute SQL. Now this might throw an exception, and hence you gotta handle the SQL exception E, and based on the cat statement's response you can probably print some kind of message to the user indicating that something went wrong inside the application. So now let's talk about the onUpgrade method, and this is all we need to discuss as far as the schema is concerned. So previously we talked about the onCreate, which I've just put dot 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 over here to represent that it contains certain code because I couldn't fit everything at one place. Then inside the onUpgrade method, this method is called when something changes inside your database structure. So here what I can say is database db, which is this SQLite database object that represents my current database. I'm gonna say db.execute SQL drop table if exists webs table. In other words, I'm actually deleting the table called webs table. Now it is your call what you want to do here. You can probably alter the table if you want, add some columns or something, or you can probably back them up to some kind of secondary database or cloud storage, and that is completely your choice what you want to do over here. In my case, which is a simple case, I'm just deleting the table. And again, what I'm doing is after the table has been deleted, the new database is being created by calling onCreate once again, because this onCreate at this point is expected to contain the new statements that we have, and there we'll see exactly how things work. Now remember, at this point, if things look a little tricky about this, exactly what is going on and how things are working, don't worry too much about it. We'll jump to Eclipse, we will make this simple app and try to understand exactly how databases work and how this onCreate and when this onUpgrade methods are triggered. In the meantime, if you guys do like what you saw, please like this video, share this video, let us know your thoughts in the comment boxes below, subscribe to our channel, and we'll catch you guys in the next video where we talk about how to make the schema in Eclipse. Have a nice day. Thanks for watching.